As you mentioned, my name is Ludeen Green. I am the one of the family advocacy manager at Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. It's a pleasure to be here today. I appreciate the invitation from Black Millennials for Flint. At Green and Healthy Homes, our mission is to break the link from unhealthy housing with unhealthy families. And that's taking a look at some of the environmental hazards that's affecting the home, including lead poisoning, asthma triggers, as well as injury prevention, and looking at an energy efficiency model as well. And what does that look like for homes in vulnerable communities for many of our Black and Brown families. So happy to talk to you today about what some of those rights are and how we use that throughout our GHHI interaction with our communities.
For that, we're very appreciative that you were able to join us. And so we'll dive right into our first question. So what should residents be looking for in terms of lead within like the lease agreement?
A good question. And oftentimes we're so excited, or resident be so excited of moving into a new place and just starting afresh, not taking the time to kind of double down on some of the rights and responsibilities when it comes to landlords on a rental property. So first, if a tenant's considering moving into a pre-1978 rental, there are a couple of things from a state perspective that's required. And the reason why I mentioned pre-1978, or why that's a key date for residents to remember, is because lead paint was banned in the United States in 1978. So any home built prior to 1978 is presumed to have lead and does fall under Maryland's law when it comes to providing certain notifications as well. So the first thing you should be checking, is this a pre-1978? If it's not, then we're not concerned about lead paint. There may be other issues, but we're not concerned about lead paint. So if it's a pre-1978, the landlord should be providing a lead paint disclosure form. What is that disclosure? It's basically saying that lead paint hazards may or may not be in the property, and it should not, right? They're renting and putting on the market, it should not. But that disclosure is letting the tenant be aware of the possibility of lead paint. And then on that disclosure, and Carlton, it's usually found towards the back of the lease, right? It's not on the front. It's not very visible, but it is on the back of the lease or towards the back. A landlord may actually have a tenant initial that you've seen the disclosure, read it, understand it. I'll be honest, some tenants just don't have the knowledge to double check what is this actually saying. They initial it and then they sign it and move on. But the requirement is that is disclosed and should be in the lease. So that's the first thing. If that's not in there and it's a pre-1978, you want to draw it back and says, hey, why am I not being fully disclosed?
Here are a few tips to keep the little person in your life safe. Dust. Dust often has lead particles in it from your outdoor shoes, so be aware of that. Chipped paint. If your house was built before 1978, please make sure you contact your local authorities to have some testing done. Clean drinking water. Please make sure that you have safe drinking water for the little person in your life supplied by either a filter or bottled water usage. Do you buy toys from Amazon or from the internet? Check the location of its origin. Blocks, dolls, and other toys may be painted with lead-based paint and other products. So, these everyday items that we're using for the little person that's growing in our life, let's make sure that while we are inspiring them to grow and make leaps and bounds, that we're keeping them safe all at the same time. Lead is all around you, but it does not have to affect you.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Yolandra Hancock. I'm a pediatrician, a public health expert, and a mommy. I'm here to talk about lead poisoning and the importance of lead screening. Let's get started. The first question that we should answer is, what is lead poisoning? Lead poisoning is when too much lead accumulates inside the body. When we get too much lead inside the body through our skin, through breathing it in, through drinking contaminated beverages, and through what we eat. It's really important for children because the younger a child is, the more easily lead can be absorbed in the body. The next question is, where does lead come from? Naturally found lead is in the soil. It's called a heavy metal, but we can also find lead in lead-based paint. Luckily, we no longer use lead-based paint here in the United States. It was banned as of the 1970s, but there's still houses, apartments, and other buildings that contain lead-based paint. And when that paint chips away or when our little ones peel at it and eat it, that increases their risk of exposure. We can also find lead in lead-contained pipes that bring us our drinking water. We can find lead in certain beauty products, certain toys, certain candies, and other foods, especially if they come from other countries. Because lead is naturally found in our soil, there's certain cultures that practice healing techniques with the use of soil that can increase a child's risk of lead exposure. And then the last place that lead can be found is with us as parents, depending on the work that we do. If we're working in areas like being a painter or being a construction worker, those tiny particles of paint or debris that land on our clothes and on our skin can actually be taken home, and our little ones can either come in contact with us and then rub their eyes, their noses, their mouths, or they can actually breathe it in. So those are the ways in which our little ones can become exposed to lead. Now, let's talk about why lead screening is so important. So the younger a child is, the more their bodies can absorb lead. So for little ones who are less than 3 years of age and unborn babies inside mommies who may be exposed to lead, those are the little ones who are at increased risk of lead poisoning, which is why at 12 months and 24 months, 1 year and 2 years of age, we standardly screen little ones to determine whether or not they have been exposed to lead. We don't want to wait until they develop symptoms because what we know is that when symptoms develop, it's likely an irreversible process. Lead is one of those sneaky things that when little ones are exposed to it, if we don't catch it early, it can cause a lot of damage inside of a little one's body. Because we know that the younger a child is, the higher their risk, what we end up doing is doing a questionnaire. So at the age of 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 15 months, 18 months, and 24 months, at each of those well baby checkups, your provider will ask you questions about lead risk. So we'll ask questions about what the parents may do for a living, how old the house is, the type of pipes, what kind of dishes you're using, etc., in order for us to know whether or not lead screening should be done sooner than 12 or 24 months. But as a standard, we universally do lead screening at 12 and 24 months, either through pricking a finger or through what we call venipuncture, where we actually draw the baby's blood. All right. Next, we'll be talking about what the results mean. Now, when a little one has a lead test done at either 12 or 24 months or sooner if they're higher risk, what we look for is a lead level of greater than 5. If a little one has a lead level greater than 5, then that means we have to pay close attention to what the risks are inside the house in terms of food, paint, etc. If the lead level is greater than 10, usually the health department comes in to do an evaluation of the home to assess for risk. For little ones with a lead level of greater than 45, which is very significant, that's an indication at 45 or greater that they need to be hospitalized and undergo a process called chelation. That's where there's an agent introduced inside the body to help pull the lead out of the little one's system, because that is an emergency. And the higher the lead level, the more likely damage will happen. So that's sort of how we respond to the lead screenings in terms of the lab levels. Next, we'll talk about what happens when a little one is exposed to lead and develops lead poisoning. Lead is harmful for a variety of reasons. The first being that it impairs red blood cell development. So our little ones are actually at increased risk of anemia when they've been exposed to lead. The other is that it blocks calcium absorption. So our little ones can develop weak bones, weak teeth, and issues with their muscles. The third is that lead can cause damage to the brain and to the kidneys, resulting in permanent damage to each of those organs. Let's talk about the signs and symptoms of lead poisoning. They can be as generic as our little ones complaining of feeling tired, complaining of muscle and joint pain. They can report headaches, nausea and vomiting, loss of appetite, and constipation. When lead is absorbed in the brain, little ones can develop attention issues, lack of concentration, even some learning disabilities. Because lead prevents red blood cells from being produced, they can develop signs of anemia, which include looking pale, having an increased heart rate. All of those things can be manifested as a sign of lead poisoning. They can also complain of a metallic taste in their mouth because of the increased levels of lead. They can also complain of headaches. So there are a variety of symptoms that little ones can present with. It's really important for us as moms and dads to pay attention to what's going on with our little ones, especially if their school performance changes. If your little one's school performance changes, one of the first questions I would ask your provider is, can we get a lead test, especially if they're under the age of 5, all right? Next up, we'll talk about treatment. Let's talk about the treatment for lead poisoning. It really depends on the level of lead inside of a child's body. For lead levels between 5 and 9, it's really about decreasing exposure. The body has an amazing way of clearing lead all on its own, but only when we decrease a child's exposure to lead so that the body has a chance to actually clear the lead from its system. With levels of 10 or higher, we want to make sure that not only do we identify and then decrease the risk of exposure, but we also want to provide nutrition necessary to decrease the amount of absorption of lead. That nutrition includes foods that are rich in vitamin C, foods that are rich in calcium, and foods that are rich in iron. And if you struggle, like a lot of us, to get our little ones to eat those kinds of foods, that's where vitamins and other supplements come in. When a child's lead level is 45 or greater, that's when it's time for our little ones to be hospitalized and allow us to take care of them. They will receive a medication called a chelator, which binds lead inside the body to help the body get rid of it. So usually at a level of 45 or greater is the indication that it's time for our little ones to come into the hospital to receive excellent care. Our goal is really to minimize risk. We don't want any little ones to have a lead level of even 5 or greater. So we're going to work collectively to decrease exposure to paints, to products, and to people who may have lead on their persons. You see how I did that with all those P's? We will do this together. All right? Take care. Thanks for listening.
Hey there, Santino Guerra, Flint City Councilman, City of Flint. Born and raised here in the great city of Flint. Studied at the University of Michigan, Flint. Majored in criminal justice and sociology. Here today just to talk to you a little bit about the ordinance that we passed with the rental inspections. So basically this ordinance is established to require people who rent their properties out to others to have their maintenance and all of the other things checked by the city of Flint to make sure that it's a safe home to actually rent out to renters. And who this benefits is the entire city of Flint. It benefits especially the residents, because these residents who are staying in these homes, sometimes they have roofs that are coming in on them, they have leaks, they have major issues, and the reason people rent most of the time is because they can't afford necessarily to actually purchase a home. So the way when you rent, you're actually not able to do some of these things that you might not be able to afford. So this ordinance makes sure that these things are done for you and that you're in a safe and quality home, not only for the individual, but the family members, the friends that come over to this home. Because remember, renters are living in these homes on a day-to-day basis. They're not just coming in here for a weekend. So the ordinance is different than the other one that we had, because this one has a little bit more teeth, requiring the inspections, making it easier for the residents to contact the city of Flint. I think it's going to be a great thing here in the city of Flint. So thanks for listening.
So in 2018, at the kickoff of Lead Prevention Week, Black Millennials for Flint completed canvassing in Baltimore City. The day included knocking on doors, canvassing homes, and educating Baltimore residents about their rights to a lead-free environment. At the time of this event, the city published an official report citing 296 lead paint violations between 2006 and 2019. On this day, Black Millennials for Flint collected some raw data from these homes. Today, as we kick off Lead Prevention Week, we wanted to follow up with a published report about any updates from this canvassing. It will be available on all Black Millennials for Flint platforms today. With this report, we wanted to let the public know of any updates that has occurred between 2018 and now, but more importantly, we wanted to provide some recommendations. So although in our analysis, we didn't see any visible updates from the housing that was canvassed, we feel it's important that recommendations not only come from grassroots organizations, but they come from Black and Brown grassroots organizations specifically. A lot of the time, we feel that solutions offered by organizations are only effective in the short term. And so we wanted to publish recommendations that we feel are not only feasible, but are actions that are necessary to have a lead-free Baltimore.